It's Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network. Welcome into the show, everybody, as we get prepared for Big 12 Media Days. Just Russ Heltman on the mic with you all to start this week. We are, of course, presented by FanDuel Sportsbook on the Believe Network. Neil Meyer joining me in the back half of the week. He is down in Texas at Big 12 Media Days as we are recording this episode right now, so we'll get a full report from him, and we will dive into some great news and notes around the Cincinnati Bearcats basketball and football programs to start the show before getting to the Big 12 Media Days preview with a look at who the Bearcats are bringing to the event and what we might take away from the next couple days of comments. First, though, we got to tell you about FanDuel Sportsbook, our great presenting sponsor, where you can bet on the World Cup. The U.S. may have gone down on Monday night, but there's still plenty of great teams left to wager on. And we are getting into the quarterfinal on Thursday. Just one more slate of round of 16 games on the board. You got Argentina and Egypt taking on each other at noon Thursday, probably happening right as you are maybe listening to this right now, or maybe you're listening to this while Switzerland and Colombia are battling. And that game at 4 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday before we take a day break and get into the quarterfinal beginning at 4 p.m. on Thursday. France minus 390 favorites on the FanDuel Sportsbook to move on to the semifinal in their battle against Morocco, who has been very feisty on the international football stage over the past 4 years, and they could give France a fun game in that contest. Head to FanDuel Sportsbook today to bet on the Frenchies to lift the cup. If you think they will continue to be the dominant team of the whole tournament, then you can wager on them still to win the title at plus 175. Spain, the next closest odds, at plus 360. FanDuel Sportsbook, great presenting sponsor of Bearcat Blitz. Quick slate of messages, and then the full show coming your way as we get into Big 12 Media Days for the football teams in the conference. A little batch of news and notes to get to as we start up this episode of Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network. I'm your host, Russ Heltman from Cincinnati Bearcats on SI, covering all these stories over there. So dive on over into the Cincinnati Bearcats on SI catalog to get more information about these topics. We start with the biggest news of the past few days. Kerr Kriisa, former Cincinnati Bearcats basketball guard, started a large chunk of games for the team last season and also spent time at Arizona, Kentucky, and West Virginia, naming them last because that's the important part of this story here, and that's where Kerr Kriisa is getting extradited to reportedly over the next week or two. He was indicted on federal charges tied to a $2.2 million fraud scheme, according to Kentucky Sports Radio's Matt Jones. And that included creating fake personas claiming that his mother had cancer, his family was losing its farm, and scamming individuals out of that $2.2 million lump sum of money. And the 25-year-old was in connection with a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme that we just mentioned. It's all tied to his time, reportedly, mostly tied to his time at West Virginia. There are instances of him trying to defraud people in later years and even into the last few months of his time at Cincinnati. Now, thankfully for the Bearcats program, for anybody else on the roster of Cincinnati, there is no point-shaving allegations coming out of this story. So, no point-shaving issues to deal with for the Bearcats program proper, but this is just a horrible story in its own right, and you feel so bad for these people that got scammed allegedly by Kerr Kriisa. All alleged here has to be obviously carried out through the U.S. court of law, but not exactly the news that you wanted to be getting on your July 4th weekend if you are Kerr Kriisa, who was slated to play for the Kentucky La Familia basketball tournament team. Obviously, Nasty Natty, the Bearcats team, has had an alumni team in the basketball tournament in years past. I'm pretty sure they're not going to have one. Almost positive they're not going to have one this season again, second consecutive year where they're not going to have a team in the basketball tournament. But Kerr Kriisa was trying to play for La Familia, the Kentucky version of that kind of outfit, and that will not be happening now. Just a crazy and just sad story. Just really, really hate to see this happen to those victims, if this is all true. And if this is all true, all these alleged crimes that Kerr Kriisa committed, just terrible. Just got in, obviously, way too deep here and facing decades in prison because of it if these alleged charges end up sticking for Kerr Kriisa. Moving along to some of our football news and notes after we got one more kind of basketball thing to touch on here. 2 exhibition games happening in the Bahamas for the Bearcats basketball program in August. This is a cool little wrinkle that Jared Calhoun is adding to his first season at the helm of this program. We haven't seen this from a Wes Miller team or any team really this decade out of the Bearcats program. They're playing a bunch of Canadian basketball programs in the Baha Mar Hoops Summer League. It's kind of part of the Baha Mar Hoops tournament. They actually host a tournament in the Bahamas during Feast Week in November. Cincinnati obviously not a part of that. They're part of the ESPN Events Invitational this November, but they are taking part in this kind of pseudo semi-pro, not semi-pro, but just kind of exhibition-laden kind of trip down into the Caribbean. This is a great way to build team camaraderie. I love this idea from Jared Calhoun. I love the idea of getting your guys in some real defined kind of set up basketball game scenarios and playing a slate of Canadian teams on this run. Obviously, you cannot play official exhibitions. You can't play like 3 or 4 official exhibitions against other Division I schools. That's not allowed under current NCAA Division I scheduling rulings. But you can play Canadian teams in exhibitions, and they will be playing 3 of them on this trip. They're taking on Calgary on Sunday, August 2nd at 2 p.m. and actually taking on 2 teams. Sunday, August 2nd, they're battling Calgary at 2, and then they're taking on the Victoria Canadian college basketball team on Tuesday, August 4th at 2:30 p.m. And it's just a nice, wonderful way to mix in some real competition before you got to take this brand new group of players up against the real Division I talents in that non-conference schedule. We don't know exactly how the non-conference slate is going to work out. They're likely going to start with a cupcake in game 1, which is how most teams operate for the most part across college basketball at the power conference level. But a great way to mix in with some other Division I programs as well and build some camaraderie in that sense when you got a highly respected program like Arkansas, John Calipari taking his team down there. Same with South Carolina's going, Texas A&M on the docket as well, and Valparaiso, all 4 of those teams, and Cincinnati, 5 U.S. teams taking on a batch of Canadian teams. So should be a lot of fun to check all of that out. Not sure if they're going to be televised. I hope they are. That'll be a lot of fun to be able to watch it, but we'll have you covered with whatever way they end up getting the information from those games out to the public. That wraps the basketball side of things on our news and notes. Let's get to the football, where big news came out on Monday in terms of the Bearcats football fall camp locations. No more Camp Higher Ground. I think last year was maybe and most likely the last time we will ever see this Bearcats football program make that daunting trip out west to the woods of eastern Indiana. It just doesn't make sense. They announced on Monday afternoon, a statement came out via the Inquirer that, quote, the University of Cincinnati and UC Athletics are grateful for 27 years of football spent at the Higher Ground Conference and Retreat Center and the relationship built with Chuck and Brenda Hale, Mark Lingle, and the Church of the Nazarene. With the opening of the Sheakley Indoor Practice Facility and Performance Center, which happened last June, it makes competitive and operational sense to fully utilize a facility that provides everything our program needs in one location, including a state-of-the-art weight room, training room, and recovery areas. And the Inquirer noted that the program's going to save, they're saving $250,000 by not making this annual trip, which last year was only a week that they were out there. Especially when you have this state-of-the-art facility, this weight room, all of these technological advances at your disposal, right on campus, right in your backyard. It would be malpractice to continue going to Camp Higher Ground. It makes zero sense to keep going there. The players, trust me, they don't really like it. They don't enjoy it. They don't want to be broken away from the real world for a week or 2 weeks at a time. They can build all this camaraderie with themselves through the natural ways that they can do it at the Sheakley Indoor Practice Facility. Plus, you're saving $250,000 by not taking up all that space and operating area at the Camp Higher Ground facility for a week's time. And you don't have to build a new locker room out there. You don't have to build a full-on weight room out there from scratch. You don't have to build a full-on recovery room, recovery area from scratch out in what is basically like a summer camp kind of setup. They have a great turf field there, but other than that, it's just completely pales into comparison of what Cincinnati would get access to if they just stayed at the Sheakley Indoor Practice Facility. So this makes perfect sense. I would be stunned if they ever go back, and personally, I'm so happy that this happened. It takes away a few hour-and-a-half round-trip practice runs that I have to make in the summers. Did not love having to go out to Camp Higher Ground. Now, knock on wood, hopefully never have to go back there again. Just make the normal commutes to Clifton. Fine by me. as we round out this news and notes slate here. 2 Bearcats named to the 2026 preseason All Big 12 team. And probably pretty easy to nail down who these guys were going to be. Veteran offensive lineman Evan Tangestal and left tackle Joe Cotton got the honorary positions here for the Cincinnati Bearcats. Cotton just narrowly missed out on an All Big 12 team last year, and Tangestal was I believe, second team All Big 12 member, third team AP All-American last year. And he's the belle of the ball for the Bearcats football program. He's basically driving and leading all of their marketing. He is kind of the driving force to get people to come out and check out this team this fall, leading the Pancake with Us. What is it? Not brigade, but marketing plan, I should say. Yeah, Pancake with Us marketing plan that the Bearcats football program is running with throughout this offseason. Can't wait. Can't wait to see Evan Tangestal in his final year in a Bearcats uniform. Can't wait to see how he positions himself for the NFL. Same with Joe Cotton. Both those guys have definite NFL potential, and we'll see if they cash in on that throughout this coming season. Nice little slate of news and notes there across this opening few minutes on the latest Bearcat Blitz. We'll get to the Media Days preview after these messages on the Believe Network. And we are presented by FanDuel Sportsbook, your place to bet on the Big 12 Conference Championship race this coming season. Texas Tech still the easy odds-on favorite right now, plus 105 to win the Big 12, followed by BYU at 6-1, Utah at 8-1, and nobody else shorter than 13-1 odds on the board. Cincinnati back in the worst spot on the board. They have flipped roles with Colorado, and they are firmly holding the lowest odds, the longest odds to win the Big 12 this coming season. That tough conference schedule is really holding them back in odds makers' eyes here. Them and Iowa State tied for the longest odds to win the Big 12 at 100-1. Colorado has moved from 100-1 to 80-1 in the past week or two. Get to Big 12 Media Days previewing that conference schedule coming up. A little bit of the conference schedule coming up after these messages on Bearcat Blitz presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's Big 12 Media Days at the Star in Frisco, Texas, and Cincinnati is sending a strong consortium of names to represent the Bearcats over the next few days. Almost all offense. QB J.C. French and Tangestal that I mentioned, Evan Tangestal, one of the all Big 12 preseason honorees. He will be there as well as Tarantayo and Antoine Peak Jr. Very interested to hear from Antoine Peak Jr. to start about just his transition from being more off-ball, kind of floating safety star position to a much more on-ball, driving to the quarterback, getting after the quarterback, rushing the passer type of player on the edge. I imagine he's put on some weight to be able to do that this offseason. He looked like he was getting the transition down pretty well in the spring, but we've had 2-3 months now to continue sharpening those tools and sharpening that tutelage. And I'm sure his dad, Antoine Peak Sr., who played this position at a high level, one of the highest level any player's ever played it in the history of Cincinnati Bearcats football. I'm sure he's been just like he was at spring football, on the field, in the summertime, individually, with Antoine Peak Jr., getting his son as ready as possible to show that not only can he play at a high level as a safety, but play at a high level as an on-ball defensive end, on-ball edge rusher as well. If he could show that versatility, then Antoine Peak Jr. will be another guy, I imagine, that ends up getting NFL looks. And even if he struggles a little bit there and has to move back to safety, I mean, he still is a player that could get attention and be a potential NFL option at the safety position as well. So Antoine Peak Jr., excited to hear from him about just this entire full offseason transition positionally. So that's going to be cool to see. Evan Tangestal, Tarantayo, there's not a ton of, I think, interesting comments, crazy things that they could say. Continuing to hear about how Nick Cardwell is adjusting to his new co-offensive coordinator role on top of leading one of the Joe Moore semifinalist offensive lines last season. So that'll be cool to hear from them. And then J.C. French. How dialed into the playbook is he? How much of a handle does he have on this playbook? How much chemistry does he feel like he's established with these wide receivers over the past 2, 3, 4 months? These are the times to work on the timing. Get that down. Get it down on air before it gets even more difficult to time it correctly in pads and in helmets. So J.C. French How has the chemistry developed with his wide receivers? How has the playbook acumen developed over the past few months just individually? And then does he look any different? I wouldn't say J.C. French looked small throughout the spring, but definitely didn't look as big as Brendan Sorsby did. Being, I think J.C. French is like 6'1", maybe just at 200 pounds. Brendan Sorsby 6'3", 235. So a little bit of a different build there. And has J.C. French added maybe 10 pounds to that frame to give himself a strong baseline to still be able to run the football at a high level from the quarterback position? These Scott Satterfield offenses thrive when that happens, and they operate most effectively when the quarterback's able to do that. That's going to be massive to see from J.C. French as he added just a little bit of weight, bulked up a little bit to give himself a little bit extra padding to take those punishments throughout a 12-plus game slate that Cincinnati is facing this fall. Fun Big 12 Media Days ahead. We'll get a full report from Mr. Neil Meyer after he returns from Texas. And for yours truly, Russ Heltman, this has been Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network presented by FanDuel Sportsbook. Have a great week, everybody.
It's a deep shot. He's got Tyler Scott, and he's into open space. First throw of the year for Desmond Ridder.